In combat sports, the fastest and most powerful athlete has a significant advantage over the competition. Speed and power are dependent on how quickly muscle fibers can activate. You can manipulate the rate that muscle fibers fire by taking advantage of a phenomenon called post-activation potentiation, or PAP. PAP typically works by loading a movement pattern with heavy resistance and then removing the resistance so you can move explosively in that same movement pattern. One example of this is doing a heavy squat prior to performing a vertical jump. The heavy squat primes the muscle fibers involved with jumping. To explain PAP a little deeper, let's take a look at a simplified model of a muscle cross-section. When you go to lift or move something heavy, your nervous system activates the muscle fibers involved in a progressive manner, from smaller fibers to larger fibers. Smaller, less powerful muscles are activated first. Once most of the smaller ones are working, the bigger ones will start to join the action. If the effort remains high, the biggest and most powerful muscle fibers will come into play last, and this takes time. Typically, explosive movements are done in a fraction of the time that it takes to activate all your muscle fibers. But once they're activated, the process happens much more rapidly. This is the purpose of utilizing a PAP protocol, to have the largest muscle fibers pre-activated at the start of competition. There are a few different ways to induce PAP. Lifting heavy weight is one way, but more than likely, you won't have access to weights at your competition. Another way to induce PAP is something called a maximum voluntary isometric contraction, or MVIC, which is just a fancy way of saying that you're trying as hard as you can to move something that can't be moved, at least by you. In some cases, MVIC has been shown to have longer lasting PAP effects compared to doing full reps with heavy weight. Sounds great, right? But how do you find an immovable object in the middle of a competition? Well, in Jiu Jitsu, you wear one around your waist. You'll see a few examples shortly on how to do MVIC using only your belt. Another great way of inducing PAP is by using plyometrics, which are a rapid drop into a position followed by an explosive movement out of that position. When you do plyos, you're trying to move as explosively as possible. That maximal effort contributes to activation of high strength and power threshold muscle fibers. A cool thing about plyos is that the effort happens in a fraction of a second, so your work time is much less. That means it takes way less time to recover from the fatigue involved. You can get a potentiation effect from plyos in 1 to 3 minutes. So if you have limited time, do some plyometrics. The only problem with plyometrics is that the effect wears off quicker too. An extremely effective PAP method that you can use before a fight or a match utilizes both MVIC and plyometrics, and it's called a contrast set. A contrast set is when you load a movement pattern with a heavy resistance and then remove the resistance to immediately perform a plyometric version of that same movement pattern. Here are some examples of how to combine an explosive movement with the MVIC exercises. This one is an isometric squat. Step on your belt with a shoulder width stance. Grab the belt low and make a loop around your hands so you don't zap your grip strength. Then push with your legs as hard as possible for about 3 seconds. This should be followed by a repeated vertical jump. MVIC push-up. Followed by the plyo push-up. The upper body pulling MVIC looks like this. It's important to keep a neutral spine during this movement. The upper body pulling plyometric is a little tricky because you can't really use your upper back muscles to jump, right? Something you can potentially do though, if you have a partner, is a rapid off-balancing. A contrast set prior to competition should be completed 6 to 12 minutes before your match. You should utilize each MVIC followed by its corresponding plyo 1 to 2 times. If you're nearing the 12-minute mark and your match hasn't started yet, I recommend doing a set of some plyometric exercises and then repeat every 2 to 3 minutes until your match starts to keep your nervous system active. Also, move around to keep your heart rate up and your body warm in between the sets.